Hello everyone, welcome back to Easy Education London, and this is the GCSE English Literature Paper 2 walkthrough. Now, what we are going to be doing is having a look at the key questions and providing you all with top tips on how to approach the exam, as the exam is literally a few weeks away, maybe even a few days away, depending on when you are watching this video. Now, before we get started, don't forget to press the subscribe button, like and share with your friends, as it does help our channel grow. Once again, thank you all for your continuous support. I do highly appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms at Easy Education London. Right, so having a look at the paper, this is the second and last paper that you will be sitting for English literature, and it's specifically on a modern text and poetry. Okay, so you will have studied a modern text, and also you have poetry for this paper. Now, the exam is quite long compared to paper 1 because it's 2 hours and 15 minutes. And generally speaking, students do struggle with this paper 2, because there's more to cover and there's more preparation which is required. Now, just to go over the key information, it's important you are aware of the key information. So always read this, prior to you going into the exam hall, so you are all aware. Now, in terms of the marks, the maximum mark for this paper is 96. AO4 will be assessed in section A. So if you remember, in paper 1, I will walk through, you would have seen AO4 is assessed on a specific question, whereas here it's in section A. And there are 30 marks for section B, and there are 32 marks for section C. So this time around, you might think, hang on, what's the difference? So you've got 3 sections: section A, section B, and section C. Okay, so section A, we're going to look at section B and section C, etc. Now, to be honest, we've already covered section C, unseen poetry. If you haven't, I will put a link somewhere above here, maybe, or even towards the end of the video, I'll put like a link or a preview of the unseen poetry question and how to answer that. Or if you prefer, if you just go through our playlist, you'll see our poetry cheat sheet and acronym that we've taught to prepare you for this question. So let's have a look at each section and we can look at it in further detail. So if I just scroll through, so as you can see, this is just a preview of the exam. You've got 3 sections, as I've mentioned. Section A is your modern prose or drama. Now, in your school, you would have studied at least one of them, okay, in preparation for your exam. So let's take An Inspector Calls. So it's the first one by J.B. Priestley. You will be looking at specifically questions 1 to 2, and your questions will be on page 4. Now, if you're studying, for example, Animal Farm, you need to look at questions 17 and 18 on page 12. Remember, you're not answering all the questions, okay? I know you may think, why am I saying this? But honestly speaking, every single year, there's always some students who make a mistake. They end up writing an answer for a text which they haven't studied. So that's for section A. Section B, same thing, but this time it's your poetry. Now, you would have studied either love and relationships or power and conflict. So let's say you studied power and conflict. That'd be specifically question 26 on page 19. And section C is the same for everyone. It's your unseen poetry. So the first part, you'd be given an unseen poem which you have not seen before. And then part B, that sounds confusing, but the unseen poetry, there's a part A and a part B. So 27.1 and 27.2. So the 27.2 will be another poem which you are expected to compare to. So let's have a look at it, and then I can provide you with some generic tips, timings, how to approach the exam, etc. So as you can see, this is the first section, and you will be given a choice, okay? Fortunately, so it could be, for example, if you're doing Inspector Calls, it could be in either number 1. Mr. Burling says, a man has to mind his own business and look after himself and his own. How far does Priestley present Mr. Burling as a man who cares only for himself and his family? Write about what Mr. Burling says and does, and how far Priestley presents Mr. Burling as a man who cares only for himself and his family. And it's worth 30 marks, and you get 4 marks separately for your assessment objective 4. Or if you prefer, you can have a go at question 2, which is how far does Priestley present male characters as irresponsible in the play? Write about one or more of the male characters and how far Priestley presents one or more of the male characters as irresponsible. So that's 30 marks again, and AO4 is worth 4 marks. So it's completely up to you whichever question you want to answer. But remember, you would know best which question you are more confident with, okay? And remember what I've said before, you need to write an answer tailored to the mark scheme. So you need to be familiar with AO1, AO2, and AO3. So prior to you going into the exam, you need to know what each assessment objective is assessing. So I've gone over this before in a previous video, or the last video that I've created, but in simple terms, what is AO1? It basically is expecting you, or the examiner expects you, to explore different aspects of the question with a range of well-chosen quotes. So that's important for you to show. And you have a good introduction which states your overall view, which you then go on to explore. So that's AO1. AO2, you analyze the effect of the writer's use of words, sentences, and language methods. So what they suggest and what they make us think and feel. Also, what they suggest the characters in the text think and feel as well. And AO3, this means you show excellent knowledge of the context. Remember, this is not just a history of what is socialism and capitalism. Write about how the characters speak and act at different points of the play. Write about how audiences might respond to the play and why. And AO4, as you can see, remember, easy marks for you. You should be getting 4 out of 4 here, ideally. What is AO4? It's your spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So in the context of the level of demand of the question, students spell and punctuate with consistent accuracy and consistently using vocabulary and sentence structures to achieve control of meaning. Now, in terms of the section A, what are some top tips, and also what are some things in terms of timing, you may ask, right? So I would say in terms of section A, you are looking to spend around 45 minutes, okay? Roughly 45 minutes on this question, and only answer on an inspector calls. And every year, a student writes on a text they have not studied, and don't let that be you. So remember, don't make that silly mistake, and only answer one of the 2 questions, okay? You will know, but again, it's all different. It's subjective as well. It's based on your opinion and your preference. Some of you may prefer to answer question 1. Some of you may prefer to answer question 2. Now, how will you know which one you want to choose? In simple terms, when you look at the question, you read it, you will naturally have, if you have more ideas for one compared to another, that's the one you want to go for, okay? So that's my advice to you. And importantly, whenever you look at the question, what I would say is highlight the key words in the question to ensure you have read it properly. And remember to plan, okay? You need to plan. I would say spend at least 5 minutes, maybe tops 10, in planning your answer for this question, and write a brief introduction where you summarize your overall argument and include quotations you have learned. And think about, when you are writing, write about Priestley's methods. Okay, so I'm just going to make a note here. So hang on, if I just underline this, Priestley present. So when you look at the methods, you're looking at his words. Okay, so that includes, I'm not going to write it all because it's going to take a long time, but it includes his the verbs, the adjectives, the nouns, etc. It includes the sentence types. So what kind of sentences, or what type of sentences is he using? The use of dramatic methods. For example, dramatic irony, is that used within the text? So dramatic methods. And also, above all, keep referring to Priestley. What is he doing and why? If you do not do this, it looks as if you think their characters are real and not written for a purpose. And include relevant context which helps you answer the question. So for example, context, let's just do this in green. Okay, I'm just going to write, okay, maybe I can write context in a different color, but let's go here. I'm just going to write it here, context. Okay, very important. as I said previously, for AO3. So, for example, you may want to include historical details which help explain what the text is referring to. So, for example, details from 1945, 1912, relevant facts about society and the different views represented by the Burlings and the inspector, how audiences might have responded in the past and today, and why the play links to the real world. The context of the whole play, so for example, how a particular part of the play links to other parts before or after. And remember, it is a play, do not call it a novel. Discuss the audience rather than the reader. And there are 4 marks for spelling, punctuation, and grammar, so check this carefully as well. And remember, the best answers understand that characters are constructs, not real, but created for a purpose. Think what these characters represent and why Priestley has created them. Okay, so essentially they are a mouthpiece for society. Now, moving on to section B. By the way, in terms of your paragraphs, I forgot to mention, how many paragraphs are you looking for? I would say anything. Let's use purple. Hang on. Purple. Yeah. Yep, there you go. So I would say maybe for the first bullet point, you're looking at 2, second bullet point 2. Okay. Same thing for this. If you're doing the second one, 2 and 2. Now remember, please do not answer both. You're just answering one. Okay. So that would be your section A done for the first part of the exam. Now moving on to section B. So if I just skip through all these questions because you would have already answered section A. Section B. Personally, my favorite section, okay, is your poetry section. So your scene poetry. So this is something that you've already studied in school with your teacher. 15 poems, okay, whether it's on love and relationships or power and conflict. Now, personally, majority of my students are studying power and conflict, and that's what I'm currently teaching as well. So you will be provided with one of the 15 from Ozymandias all the way down to Kamikaze, and you'll be provided with a question. So let's have a look at it in further detail. Remember, the assessment objectives essentially are the same. And what are some things that you need to remember? Let's have a look at it. So the typical question you may have, okay, is something like, compare how poets present the ways people are affected by difficult experiences in Remains and in one other poem from Power and Conflict. And that's worth 30 marks. So 30 marks, yes, it's a lot of, whoops, sorry, why am I crossing out? I should be using a highlighter. So yes, 30 marks here. It is a lot of marks, to be fair. Now, how do I approach this question? First things first, you're looking to spend again 45 minutes on this section. And also remember, you need to highlight the keywords in the question. So difficult experiences. Okay, so we clearly see that in Remains, and you need to keep in mind which poem are you going to be comparing to. And what I really, really recommend you have to do, okay, if you want to get the top marks, is plan. Just like I say for English language, plan your question. Okay, spend 5 minutes or so planning this question and reread the poem that they have asked you to write about, and consider one other poem you want to compare it to carefully. And a bad poem choice can really be a disaster, so it's very important you know which one to compare to. Make sure you answer the question, don't just talk about the poems, respond to the task set, and use quotations from the poem they have chosen, and try to remember quotations from your chosen poem. Remember, when you answer this question, identify language features in the poem accurately and explain the effect on the reader. The exam board would rather you gave a really clear, well-explained comment about the effect on the reader of a quote than just identifying a technique such as simile, but have a poor comment on it. So if you want to get the top marks, in simple terms, I'm going to say, focus on the effect. Okay? For example, the effect of language. Okay, that's something that can get you top marks. Also, refer to the speaker of the poem. Don't assume the poet is writing as themselves, and compare. When you compare, use connectives to draw similarities and differences between the poems. And you do have to discuss context as well. So do not give details about the writer's lives or give lots of historical background. The context is in the poem for you to discuss as well. So what are some linking words and phrases that you may want to use? For example, I'll just make a note here just to make it easy for you. You may want to use phrases or words like whereas, unlike, However, okay. If you want to indicate similarities, then it could be similarly. You could be using on the other hand. On the other hand. Dot, dot, dot. Okay, so remember, it's important to use these top tips as well. Now, so that is your section B for your poetry, 30 marks. Again, how many paragraphs are you looking to write? I've gone over this previously in a previous video. So if it's 45 minutes, you're looking at anywhere between 3 to 4 paragraphs, okay? So that should get you paragraphs. Sorry, it's a bit messy here. Okay, so that's how you would do it. And remember to make sure you compare it with one other poem. That's super important. So prior to you going into the exam, you should have memorized the poems. Well, as in not every line, but memorized the key themes, the key quotes from each poem. And you should already have a table of knowing which poem you'll be comparing to which one, because that will save you time in the exam and it'll make it easier for you to answer the question. So that's section B. Moving on to the final section, section C. Now, I've already covered this in a previous video. I will put the link to that video somewhere here, maybe top right or top left. But essentially, on scene poetry, it's the first part, which is the 24 marker. Okay, so it says, I am offering this poem, how does the poet present the speaker's feelings about love? And that's worth 24 marks. So how do you approach this question? In simple terms, okay, first of all, timing, okay? So if it's 24 marks, let's highlight that. If it's 24 marks, let's use blue. Just going to write above here. You're looking to spend around 30 minutes. And if you're spending 30 minutes on the question, you're looking to write around 3 to 4 paragraphs as well. So that's one thing that you want to remember. And remember, look at the keywords within the question. The speaker's feelings about love. So you need to find quotes that actually indicate that. So my advice to you, when you look at the unseen poetry in your exam, make sure whilst you are reading, you are annotating. Don't leave the poem blank. That's where a lot of students go wrong and they struggle to answer the question. Make sure when you're reading, annotate, highlight, because that will definitely help you in preparation for the comparison question, and it'll save you time importantly. So read the poem carefully and make sure you understand what it's about. Use quotations and identify the poet's techniques accurately, and explain the effect on the reader of these techniques. How does it make the reader think and feel? That's something you want to ask yourself. So I'm just going to write here the effect. Again, you need to talk about. Super important. So what is the effect of the technique? And how does the language demonstrate what those in the poem think and feel? And picture the imagery and think why it has been chosen. Okay, so that's something for you to do and consider. Now, in terms of section C, okay, that is your unseen poetry, and there's a second part. Don't forget about the second part, because unfortunately I have had students come up to me and say, oh sir, I didn't know there was a second part to it, and that way they lost out on some easy marks, and it's worth 8 marks. This is the last question that you'll ever do for literature. It's 8 marks. Again, I would say you're looking at 2 to 3 paragraphs. Okay, paragraphs. Okay, so that's something that you need to remember. How long should you spend on this section? I would say anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe, even to be honest, you can get this question done within 1 paragraph. It depends what you say. So what are some things that you need to remember in terms of this question? So just to go over it very quickly, just to go over the mark scheme, what are we expected to do? Now, in terms of the mark scheme, you need to make exploratory comparison of the writer's use of language, structure and form with subject terminology used judiciously, and make convincing comparisons of the effect of the writer's methods on the reader. So what does this mean, you wonder? You may think. It's basically you write about the effects of language in both poems and don't just summarize them. Try to find one great language technique in each poem and explain the effect, what it makes us think and feel, or what is it suggests those in the poem think and feel. And just to give you some top tips for this second part, for section C, I'll spend just over 15 minutes on this question. Try to find time to do this question at the end of the exam, but remember there are 8 marks only, so do spend longer on part 1 of section A. The question says compare, so do write about both poems and use quotes from both poems. You should try to discuss at least one of the following in each poem. So just to remind you, these are some areas for you to consider. Language, then we have structure, and then we have form. Okay, so these are some areas for you to explore when answering this question. So language techniques used in both poems, do they use similes, metaphors, verbs, adjectives? Structure, how does a poem begin, develop and end? Look at the verse structure and key turning points in the poem. And look at form, the type of poem it is and why the poet might have chosen this type of poem. For example, a dramatic monologue or a sonnet as well. What are some linking words and phrases you could use to indicate differences? So I've said this previously for the previous question. You may want to use words. You may want to use phrases or words like whereas. On the other hand, okay, that's if you're looking at the differences. On the other hand, dot dot dot, whereas dot dot dot. And if you're looking at similarities, you could say similarly, and so on. Okay, so that is that for section C. And how do you improve and how do you prepare for unseen poetry? The easiest approach, or the best way to approach this question, in all honesty, is practice. Okay, I know it sounds cliche, but you need to practice, because the more practice you do, the more confident you'll be, and it's something that will help you maximize your marks. And if you are unsure of how to approach the unseen poetry, I have created a video, a cheat sheet on how to answer any unseen poetry question using a special acronym. Now, if you have watched that video, do let me know in the comment section below, because I am curious to find out how many of you who have watched it and found this helpful. So the acronym or the hack or the cheat sheet that I've covered is something that you can use for any unseen poetry question, regardless of your exam board. So that is that for paper 2, English literature, and this is your walkthrough with the top tips, the paragraph, the timings, etc. So I hope this video gives you an insight or a better insight of how to prepare for English literature paper 2. We are just over, I believe, 2 weeks away. Depending on when you're watching it, you might be watching the night before or a few days before the exam. And what I wanted to say is best of luck to all our students at Easy Education London, and best of luck to all our subscribers as well. You all have worked really well. You've worked incredibly hard this academic year, and hopefully your hard work will pay off. So that is it for today's video. I hope you found this video informative. I hope it was beneficial. And as you can imagine, we have received multiple requests of doing an exam paper walkthrough with top tips, paragraphs, timings, etc. So I hope this is something beneficial and you can use in preparation for your exams. Don't forget to check through our playlist, as we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of amazing revision videos for GCSE English literature, but also GCSE English language. So this is essentially a place for you to revise in a simple but effective way in preparation for your exams. Now, if you are interested in joining our online classes, do contact our email, which is easyeducationlondon@gmail.com. You may ask, why should I join? The reason is you will receive the academic help and support from our expert and professional teachers. We'll support you and guide you in preparation for your GCSE exams and help you achieve the highest possible grades. Now, what are you waiting for? Spaces are limited, so contact us today to book your classes. And that is it for today's video. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms at Easy Education London on Instagram, TikTok, etc. And also, please do share our channel with your friends, as it does really help our channel grow. And yeah, thank you very much for your continued support, the positive feedback, the likes, etc., as it does really help our channel grow. So yes, thank you very much. Do subscribe, like and share for more. Thank you.